Welcome back in, everybody. I am Ben Parker, Sports and Money, Pro Football GM. Simon Short is with us on board again today. Massive Steelers fan. The Bills game, of course, has been moved. Some of you will see this after the Bills game. Some of you will see it before. We'll keep an eye on that the entire situation there in Buffalo. We're covering the NFC side today, so we've got 4 spots available on the NFC side that we're going to talk about. Mainly talking about not what we think will happen, but what we want to happen. Because, of course, that's more important than anything else going on, is what we would want to happen. Of course, that's what we're going to focus on today. But we will talk about some different openings here today. Most of it focused on the head coach. Simon's got a few of the coordinator spots lined up as well because he is very much in tune with a lot of that on the in-depth side as well. But Simon, welcome back in, man.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yes, happy to be here. I will log a formal complaint about the Steelers and Bills reschedule, and it has nothing to do with the football aspect. Do what's best for the people of Buffalo, not even just the players. Keep everybody safe. I love that. But to go from the most convenient time spot for a parent NFL fan to the least convenient of all time, going from 1 p.m. middle of the day, can go out and do stuff, right? The kid can go out and do stuff with the other parent. Everyone, you just had lunch. You can kind of just hang out and do some stuff in the living room while the game is on. To the most inconvenient time, which is get ready for dinner, have dinner, then get ready for bedtime. Shame on the NFL. Do better. I'm furious. But yeah, I'm doing
Yeah.
great. Other than that, Ben, thanks.
I was looking forward to a snow game. I don't guess we're going to get one. Maybe we still will, but
And they'll still be covered in snow. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
yeah.
Anyways, whatever. It's fine. I'm okay. Totally fine. My wife's happy with me. My daughter's happy.
Okay.
Great.
Well, great. Let's talk about some NFC teams. Everybody listening today, thank you for being with us. You might be hearing us on a number of platforms that we're working on today, but appreciate you being in. I think I'm going to start off with the train wreck. Quite honestly, that's the
Ooh.
Carolina Panthers. I was tempted to save them for last, but you know what? Let's just go ahead and get them out of the way. Let's kick them in the rear end first here. There's a part of me that doesn't even care what happens to Carolina because they have just screwed themselves into a corner now. And they've got public image problems, which is what the NFL was trying to get away from when they encouraged the switching of owners a few years ago off of Richardson. They can't keep a general manager. They can't keep a head coach. I mean, it's amazing. They were already quick on the trigger, but the times have gotten shorter on their tolerance times for GM and coach
Hmm.
and quarterback too, for that matter. So tell me what you're feeling here on Carolina. I've got a guy in mind, but tell me what you're feeling.
All right. So if you haven't listened to the AFC pod yet, I started my matchmaking with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, taking the 6 names that we feel really good about being head coaches next year. Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Pete Carroll. Maybe you're in or out on that. I don't know. Jim Harbaugh, and then your top coordinators, Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald. I think all those guys are too good for this job. On one hand, I would love to see Jim Harbaugh go, be there for 6 weeks, fight David Tepper, and then leave. On the other hand, I would love to see Bill Belichick, big boy David Tepper, and tell him what's what. But those guys aren't going there. It's not going to happen. And Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald are going to be well too sought after to take that job. Like you said, it's a terrible job. So here's what I'm doing. For Carolina, I needed to find a guy that had enough respect and enough sway and enough veteranship that he wouldn't be scared of Tepper, but also enough newness, energy, and excitement that he would be able to hopefully work with and fix Bryce Young. So what I did was I went with probably the most likable and the guy with maybe the highest or tied for the highest GQ rating of all these guys. And I went with Dan Quinn of the Dallas Cowboys going here to be the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Everybody that's ever worked with Dan Quinn, whether you're in the media, you're a coach, you're a player, absolutely loves the guy. He's a tough dude that's been in the league forever, so I don't think he'd be scared off by Tepper. But I also think he'd be like likable enough and have enough flash as a hire that
Yeah.
Tepper would respect him a little bit. And by the way, the bonus that I'm getting with this, I'm getting Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore back together, and I'm bringing Kellen Moore to be the OC for Bryce Young. And now you can either keep Ajiro Evero as defensive coordinator, but if he and Dan Quinn, because both being defensive minds, couldn't really work it out, and Evero goes somewhere else, then I had written down. have to scroll all the way down because yeah, Carolina Panthers were the last team I thought talked about in my notes here. Defensive coordinator, I wrote Joe Witt Jr., who is I think he's the pass game coordinator and one of the secondary coaches for the Cowboys right now. So he works under Dan Quinn in Dallas. He did the same in Atlanta for a year or two. So I had him coming over with Dan Quinn, but you get Kellen Moore there to work with Bryce Young. You get Dan Quinn there as a well-respected guy who's due for another time around the block as a head coach. What do you think about that move?
I actually like that. And all joking aside, it's a legit NFL job, and there's going to be a number of guys who can't get a head coaching job somewhere else that are going to be glad to take this one. It's going to be their only shot. I get it. It's not ideal, but for some people, you get what you get. So I actually like this. I like it all the way across the board. The coordinators, the head coach, Dan Quinn. And again, it's going to be somebody who doesn't have their pick somewhere else. We know that's going to be the case. This job is so bad, I'm not certain that some people wouldn't be tempted to take a coordinator job for another year or two if they think they got a head coaching job in the future. It's that bad. But some of these guys don't have that feeling anymore. They know that they're not on the young end of the carousel anymore. They're not on the hot, trendy end of it anymore. They got to be realistic about their prospects, and this might be the best one they ever get. So maybe Quinn falls into that category. I'm going to bring up another name that I think does as well, but I certainly like Quinn for sure. The name I'm going to throw out there is Eric Bieniemy. This is a guy that was hot for a while. This is a guy that I think could at least have a chance at helping to develop Bryce Young. This is a guy, fair or not, that I don't know is going to get a whole lot of looks anywhere else. He'll get some interviews, but how many people are actually going to be looking at bringing him in when you've got Harbaugh, when you've got Vrabel, when you've got Pierce sitting there and the Raiders maybe taking that spot away, when you've got Belichick sitting out there, Carroll sitting out there, I don't know. So Bieniemy's not going to have a whole lot more looks. This might be one of his best. So I actually like him going there as well. But that largely fits into the Quinn category, except Quinn has had a chance. Bieniemy has not. So I'm with you. That's where I'm going with this. I do hope they get somebody good and get this thing stabilized, to get it all put back together so it's not a clown show. But that's where I'm at on this one.
Yeah, I'd just be so worried that for Bieniemy to get the short end of the stick, not having had the opportunity to be a head coach yet. Dan Quinn has had it, so I won't be quite as upset for him if he gets canned after a year or two for Tepper. I want Bieniemy to finally get a situation that has a long runway to it once he finally gets one. But I'm with you. I don't think that would be a bad hire at all. The other guy, very much in the Quinn light, that I picked for this for all the same reasons, is Raheem Morse, the defensive coordinator for the Rams. So well liked around the league, so well respected. I think could hold his own with Tepper. I think I have Zach Robinson, the QB coach for the Rams, kind of listed as the guy that could come over and be his OC. A guy that's very well connected around the league too. He's been in a lot of places. That's a guy that Ejiro Evero might stick around for because Morris might take because he's had more, he's been on the offensive side of the ball as a position coach as well. So maybe he's not as emotionally tied to being in charge of the defense as a Dan Quinn would be. That was another name I threw here. I think there's some names for sure that I would like to see from a football standpoint, but I feel bad tying anybody to David Tepper, man. But for guys like Dan Quinn, Raheem Morris, and even Eric Bieniemy, like, you're not the young up and comer, like you said. You're not the well-established guy you can pick. And these were all guys that maybe would have been the top candidates if we weren't in an offseason where Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick, and Pete Carroll were out of their jobs, right? These guys might have had their pick of jobs up until the decisions that have been made in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a Pete Carroll or a Bill Belichick did show up here to get their one last run at it. It's a catch-22 there with a guy like Eric Bieniemy, because we've watched him get bypassed multiple times now for guys who were getting their second chances, guys who already didn't do too hot in their first run, like McDaniels. Like, I can't remember the guy for the Jets a couple of years ago who went like either from the Jets to the Dolphins or from the Dolphins to the Jets. And we've watched him get bypassed multiple times now.
Adam Gase.
Yeah, exactly. For guys who didn't do good the first time and got a second chance. And yet at the same time, you mentioned it, do we really want him to go to a place that's super impatient and cuts guys off after a year or two and that's his only chance? No, I don't want that either, but that might be his only shot, So if you're Bieniemy, I don't know how you feel about that. Continuing to watch guys get their second chance who didn't deserve a second chance, or watching some young guy, some young unknown get the shot, and you can't even get that job. I don't feel great about it either way. The Panthers have tried everything. They have literally tried everything. They've tried old guy, young guy, old quarterback, young quarterback, hot, trendy offensive name. They've tried defensive. They've tried in the middle. They've tried everything. They've been patient with none of it. They've built nothing. It's a clown show. And so my number one advice to Tepper is no matter who the heck you bring in, Quinn, Bieniemy, Carroll, Belichick, some new hot guy that you pulled out of the college ranks, give him 4 years
Gosh.
and leave it the heck alone. Just let something be stable there and forget trying to just pull guys in and out until you get a match that catches fire because it's clearly not working that way.
Want to get to the good jobs now?
Let's do it, man. Go ahead and pull another name out of the hat here.
Let's get to the job that I think is the second best available in the entire NFL, and it's the Washington Commanders. We both have a soft spot, emotional attachment to the Commanders because of our buddy Robertson Vire and me growing up and living in Virginia, having tons of Washington football fans in my life. I'll just come out and say it. I think the Commanders are going to get Ben Johnson as their head coach. I think it's going to happen. I think it's the right thing to do. The ownership group of Josh Harris and Magic Johnson put together their cabal of super smart sports executives and have quickly moved and jumped on Adam Peters, the top GM candidate in the NFL this cycle. And I think they're going to continue to do it with the head coach. I think they're going to be fast, aggressive, and I think they're going to get not just the number one guy on the market, because that's probably your Belichick or your Mike Vrabel because of their past, right? Their history, their standing in the league. But get like you said, the hot number one up and comer, and that's Ben Johnson. I mean, again, before all those guys got fired, you talk about who's going to be the number one coaching candidate. We were getting rumors that Johnson wanted $20 million a year, which have since been debunked and everything. But like this is the guy we were talking about. He passed on the jobs last year so he could get the pick of even better jobs this year. And it worked because the Lions were even better than they were last year. I think they get their guy. I think having fallen kind of into the number 2 pick gets you one of the top quarterbacks. I think you get the offensive minded guy. You work everything else out. I'll talk about some of the coordinators that I have for them next. But this furthers the Drake May agenda that I set out there, right? Bob Myers comes over. I said that the Commanders have a basketball team assembled in their front office, right? So they're getting at least a former D1 college basketball recruit that chose football. And by the way, I don't know what Drake May's actual basketball history is, but his brother Luke May played basketball for the Tar Heels, won a national championship. And you want to know where Ben Johnson went to school and was a walk-on quarterback, Ben?
Tell me.
The UNC Tar Heels, baby. Drake May to Washington, along with Ben Johnson. Him and Sam Howell are going to get together and have UNC stories, and Magic and Bob Myers and Adam Peters, I think, probably played hoops at some point. They're going to play 3-on-3 with those guys in the parking lot after practice. It's going to be a vibe. It's going to be a great time. So Ben Johnson, the Commanders get their guy, and they build this thing for the long haul and draft.
Which is only fitting since the nation of DC is losing their basketball team to the suburbs, so now they need to put a new one in there.
Listen, let's not talk about that. I'm actually for that. Go family night for the Washington Wizards for the Alexandria. I don't know, axe wielders. I can't think of a good name off the top of my head. Change the name.
We're way off the rails here. I'm going to blame you for that, but
that's fine. It's usually me.
I agree with everything you said. Now, I actually like Ben Johnson better in Atlanta. I think that's the better fit for Ben Johnson and for my emotional attachment. That's my fantasy. That aside, the Commanders is a great place for Ben Johnson, and they should be going after him. They should already be putting feelers out there that, hey, we're in the mix here. Don't go anywhere, because they can't officially talk to him yet. But then the very second he's done with his thing in Detroit, they should be flying out to him and meeting him and getting him signed up. Because they made the right decision with Peters. There's a number of good general manager candidates out there, but Peters is the most established and the longest and seems to have the best, highest percentage chance of success. So that's great. You've got the energy in the building with the new owner. You want to match that with the young, new offensive mind that seems to have success in Ben Johnson. And then you go out and get a quarterback. You let Howell compete still with whatever first round draft pick you bring in. That's fine. But you go out and you get another quarterback, whether it's Caleb Williams, Drake May, or even Daniels from LSU. You go and get those guys, and then you build that offensive line. And I think you're built for success. I really do. I think everything looks great there in Washington. So I'm with you all the way on that, even though I would love to see Ben Johnson down in Atlanta.
Yeah, this came down. I love him in Atlanta as well, especially if they go trade for a Justin Fields or trade up for a quarterback. But because I loved both situations, right? I talked about
Mm-hmm.
in the last episode doing harmony, right? Getting as many good situations for as many good teams as possible. Because I think he's great for both. I went with who's going to be more aggressive and what's going to be the most attractive. And I think having that top two pick and having a group that's going to, I think, really go after him also makes it, I think, the most likely scenario.
It's a great point that you make here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to double down on something that I already beat a dead horse on in the last one, so I'll give you a chance to rebuttal if you want. It's a great point you make here about the Commanders being aggressive, and not one that I had thought about before you and I started talking, but they are. But they're able to do that because they've known this was coming for a year or two. They have
Hmm.
known this was coming. They've had time to quietly scheme behind closed doors and plan out what they wanted to happen.
Yep.
The Falcons haven't been able to do that because they thought they were going to stick with Arthur Smith probably up until about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yep.
So they're just not going to be able to move as fast on a guy like Ben Johnson or whoever. The Commanders, having known that, hey, this is not going well and we're going to change everything, have been able to plan this for a while. So they are able to get really aggressive really fast. And I do like what they're doing there for sure. But anyway, I liken it to this is where I was going to go with the stab here. The Raiders have known this was coming for a few months as well. They've done squat. They're still sitting here fishing in different holes. You know, they don't know what they want to do, but the Commanders do. So
Back for a double tap on the Raiders here in the NFC
I did.
podcast.
Raiders catch a stray one on the NFC side of things.
Well, should we talk about the Falcons who you have Ben Johnson going to next then?
Let's do it. So obviously, you know, I like Ben Johnson there, and you know
Yep.
why, because they've got so many offensive skill positions that really didn't seem like they were getting used. And they've got a pretty good offensive line there. It's not anywhere near as good as that Detroit offensive line that Ben Johnson was privileged to work with. It's just not. But I actually think the skill positions are better. And I think you've got the flexibility there to probably get a quarterback that Ben Johnson likes even better
Hmm.
than Jared Goff. I'm not trying
Oh
to
yeah.
rip Goff here, but Goff has limitations. And he has some good things he offers, but he has limitations. And I think if you're the Falcons, you have the chance here, and you'll need to get aggressive at quarterback, I think. But you get a guy in here that Ben Johnson likes. And I think you tell him that when the Commanders start offering a lot of money and a lot of energy and optimism to Ben Johnson, I think if you're the Falcons, you're going to tell him, hey, we'll be aggressive here and we'll get you the quarterback that you like. And oh, by the way, we've got years of stability here that the Commanders don't have. They've got new ownership, which is great, but we've got Arthur Blank over here who has done nothing but support everybody in the building. And he's fantastic to work for too. And you're going to like being down here as well. So I think that's something to offer. It may not be quite as good as what the Commanders have, but I think you do have something appealing there in Atlanta too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the flexibility to get a quarterback right now over the cap has them projected at about $26 million in cap space. That's even a low ball projection, I think, based on what the cap could go to. But they have easy places to restructure money. I don't see a lot of cuts I would necessarily make, except for maybe Taylor Heineke if you're going to go draft a quarterback. Let's see, you cut Taylor Heineke, you go from $9 million cap hit to $2 million. That's nice. You can restructure guys who are still in their prime, like Lindstrom and Bates. You can easily get enough to go get a Kirk Cousins if you want, if he's the top quarterback in free agency. Or, yeah, with what do they have, the 10th overall pick, something like that. You could easily move up to get Daniels if you need. You maybe can fight your way into number one overall, depending on what Chicago does. But I think there's a lot of options there for sure.
Let me ask a question that you may not be prepared for, but that's okay. We'll wing it here. What are the odds? Because one name we haven't mentioned in all of this so far is Mike McDonald, the DC, and that's in either episode, right? You may have him penciled in somewhere else. Let's say Ben Johnson goes to Washington, and now Atlanta is starting to look at choices B, C, and D. How high up would Mike McDonald be? And would that just feel like Dan Quinn 2.0? Because that would be awfully similar to what you did 8, 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, I want an offensive person for Atlanta. I've said I like Scott Nielsen, the defensive coordinator they have, and what they've done to build up that defense over the last couple of years. I'd rather keep that intact and get someone who can really take advantage. Because if I'm the owner or GM, I'm like, I've invested money in my draft picks into these offensive weapons. I need an offensive guy. And if I don't get the Ben Johnson, and if I don't want to do what we said for the Titans in the AFC pod, which is go for the second rate offensive guy, then go get me the really high pro. Get me they're tied to Belichick a lot right now. Go get me him. Go get me of Rabel. And I'd actually personally I probably wouldn't. I probably would rather go with the younger guy because then maybe he does let Nielsen stick around as DC because like even if I'm defensive minded, I am a first time head coach. So let me focus on coaching everything. I'll give my input on defense, but you've got that. So I wouldn't mind it necessarily, but I'd rather go offensive minded, even if I don't get Ben Johnson, I think.
I would too. No, I'm struggling to come up with the offensive mind after Ben Johnson that I really am in love with. There's guys out there like a Dave Canales from Tampa Bay. There are guys out there, but I don't know that I feel as strongly about them as
Yeah,
having watched Ben Johnson the past 2 years in
definitely.
Detroit work with Jared Goff and what hasn't been the most explosive offensive weapons. It's been a good set there, but it's not the most. Maybe not even top five, top eight in the NFL to me. So I like Ben Johnson there. What if you bring in a guy like Vrabel that you mentioned? Don't you have to have a conversation with him about offensive coordinator and about actually using these weapons and not just settling in? I mean, don't you have to have that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to see what his plan is. Oh, I didn't even mention when we were on Washington who I had for Ben Johnson. Sorry, I got all sidetracked. Um, if I am Ben Johnson, wait, do you want me to backtrack to Ben Johnson in the OC first before I stick? Yeah, let me do
Let's
that.
hit Falcons first, and then go back and
Okay,
hit Ben Johnson on the
okay.
on the Commanders. Yeah,
My apologies, listeners. Here's who I had penciled in for the Falcons, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. It's Jim Harbaugh. Um, I did different stuff with the Chargers and the AFC pod than you. That's where you had Harbaugh.
right.
I think that fits. It makes a lot of sense. I think him and Carolina would be really entertaining and funny. But I went with the Falcons because of what you're kind of saying, right? Where it's who's the next guy? If you want more of an offensive side of the guy, who do you have there for the Falcons? That can leave Ryan Nielsen to be, I think I said Scott Nielsen, or if you leave Nielsen to be in charge of the defense, you bring Jim Harbaugh in, he can do what he wants on offense. He can do his culture thing with the team, right? They've been kind of this lovable loser for a long time, but he could be offensive minded. And, we said this in the last one, we don't really know what he wants. And this opportunity, because of that flexibility with the quarterback position, he could
Right.
do anything. If he's like, hey, I watched Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati and I think I could, with a real culture in place, do something. Or
Mm-hmm.
with our draft pick, give me a fresh guy, give me a clean slate. Or, hey, go give me a vet and I can put an offense together that will win 10 games right now. So I think he gives you that flexibility. So I like Jim Harbaugh there. I like him keeping Ryan Nielsen there as the DC. And then did I give him an offensive coordinator? Oh, you're gonna like this one. I like Ken Dorsey to come be the OC, because I could see him and Jim Harbaugh be just like the weirdest, most animated dudes. Both former college quarterbacks, both former short, not short time for Harbaugh, but both NFL quarterbacks. Um, Offensive minded guys. I could see them working in this like frantic, really weird thing. And like Ken Dorsey was a good offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills and QB coach before that. So I like for Atlanta, Jim Harbaugh, who brings in Ken Dorsey to help kind of bridge that gap between, hey, I've been out of the NFL for a long time and you've been a high success coordinator, and I could see them working well together, and then keeping Ryan Nielsen as the defensive coordinator. What do you think of that?
I love the Harbaugh thing. The reason I love it because I would be okay with Belichick and Carroll going to Atlanta, except boy, you don't figure 4 seasons, 5 seasons, they're probably done, right? You don't really figure they're coaching past
Right. Yep,
78,
exactly.
80. I don't think so. So Harbaugh, at least, even though you figure, hey, he may not be there forever, he's younger, he should be there for longer, you would think. Maybe you get
Yep.
10 years out of him, maybe if he's winning and likes what he's got going on. So that's what I'm at there. But I do like Harbaugh, and especially like it. That's a weak butt division right there. That division just has we mentioned it, ducks floating around in a pond, just kind of wandering around, and the Panthers just over here to the side with their head down in the water and their butt sticking up in the air, right? I mean, it is weak. And if you had a guy like Harbaugh coming in, I think he would take control of that division. I just think he
Yep.
would. Even
Yep.
if he couldn't get you to a Super Bowl, he takes control of the division, and I like that. So, yeah, I love Harbaugh to the Falcons, even though I like Harbaugh to the Chargers better. I do like Harbaugh to the Falcons as well. So, give us our Ben Johnson take, man.
Yeah, let me go out and build my Ben Johnson staff here in Washington. Offensive coordinator. You mentioned what do you do with Ben Johnson? You're like, hey, I know you're the hotshot OC. You had a lot of pros in Detroit. Um, what do you do to help yourself coming here, and how do you focus on the head coach duties and not just being the glorified offense coordinator? I like Deuce Staley coming in to be the OC wherever Ben Johnson goes, but especially in Washington. Deuce Staley was part of that coup that took place for the Panthers. He was the running back coach and assistant head coach under Frank Reich. And then when Scott Tabor, the special teams coordinator, got promoted to interim coach, and who's our boy Jim Caldwell got more power within the offense. What did they do? They got rid of the young guys who might have had a chance to take the Panthers job, Deuce Staley and Josh McCown. So I like Deuce Staley. Um, he's one of those names like Bieniemy that's really highly talked about, but he's been waiting for his shot for a really long time. He's been an assistant head coach multiple times with different teams, but never officially an offensive coordinator. Um, and he does have a relationship with Ben Johnson. They overlapped for I think 2 years in Detroit in Ben Johnson, or maybe just 1 year in Detroit. But they have overlap there. They've worked together on an offensive staff before. So I'd really like to see Ben Johnson bring in Deuce Staley as a vet guy, but who's never had a chance to be a true OC yet. I'd like to see them work together. Ben Johnson, as a former quarterback, you got that. You've got Deuce Staley, the former running back. I would like that. And then defensive coordinator. I've got two young guys, first time head coach, first time OC. I need that vet defensive coordinator I've been talking about, Ben. Wink Martindale. Give me Wink Martindale in Washington. It's going to be a bad unit. We've talked about this. Get him in there with a bunch of dudes just flying around and blitz the ever living crap out of the other team, and let Ben Johnson do his thing on offense. So that's my DC coaching staff: Ben Johnson, Deuce Staley, and Wink Martindale.
No, I like that as well. That's a very well-rounded group. And again, you never know. I never know how much connections matter. Connections seem to matter a lot more to other people than they do to me. But I'm also not a very well-connected guy. So when you have a lot of connections, you're like, hey, I can draw off of them. It feels good. I get it. I will say, listen, you and I have talked about it, and I don't mean to get off on a tangent here, so I won't stay on it, but I'll give you plenty of time to hit it. You and I have hit on a number of minority candidates for lead jobs. And you mentioned it. There's a lot of chatter around some of these guys, like Raheem Morris or Eric
Mm-hmm.
Bieniemy. Sometimes all that is chatter from the national media to some of the owners and the other people in the NFL. They're just talking it up. They have no intention of actually hiring some of these people for some of these spots. You and I today, and not on purpose, just because we like these people for these
Yep.
jobs, you and I have pointed out a number of guys for specific jobs that match up. They line up. And for the NFL to not continue to get some of these guys in these spots, I don't know who to blame, but somebody should be ashamed of themselves for bypassing it. And the language you always hear is, well, it just wasn't a right fit for us, or, well, we just went in a different direction. Well, bullcrap. You probably just didn't consider this guy because he wasn't your buddy, or you didn't have a connection with him, or you didn't feel like you'd go out and drink beers with him after work. That's what you're feeling, and it really should be about winning and results. And I think that's not always the case for some of these guys. You and I today have mentioned, and we started off with this on the AFC side of things, and we've continued it here through the NFC guys. I don't care what color you are, or if I can drink beers with you after work. I want you to win. And that's the lead thing right there. And so that's why some of these guys should be getting these jobs, not for any other reason.
Yeah, very well said. Couldn't agree more. Would love to see more opportunities for Black and other minority head coaches to get first opportunities as well as second opportunities. We've seen guys like Josh McDaniels and we've talked about Dan Quinn getting a second shot at this thing, and not putting anything on those guys specifically, but we've seen more white head coaches get second chances than black head coaches, and that should absolutely be changed in the NFL.
Yeah, it should. It's always tough to change because you don't know who to shoot at, right? No, there were at least two jobs last offseason that I said should have been chasing Eric Bieniemy first. They didn't.
Hmm.
I think they had him
Hmm.
third or fifth on their list,
Yeah.
if at all. So there are specific names that are getting bypassed, not because someone is out to get an African American, but usually it's because they're just not comfortable doing it. They're like, I don't feel a link there. Well, it should be about winning. That should be what it's about and about
Yep.
results. And so at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. And that's what you and I are striving for here. So speaking of winning, let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks here. So they've won for a very long time. It's been a while since it was a high level, but here they are. They're continuing to win, and yet Pete Carroll is out. We already covered that. But who would you like to see in?
So this is where I have Mike Macdonald. I would like to see Mike Macdonald go here for a number of reasons. One is we talked in the firing pod about how bad that defense is. So give me the guy that I think could come in and fix this defense right away, even with the existing roster. We mentioned it. It's a good roster. They've drafted well. They've signed good players. They've traded for good players. I think he could come in and put the right scheme in place right away and mimic some of the stuff they did in Baltimore. Not everything because you don't have those stud off-ball linebackers, but you've got pieces, you've got talent. I think he's going to be the kind of guy that meshes with the talent that he has on the roster. Not he has to bring over his scheme and fit a square peg in a round hole. So I like Mike McDonald here for that reason. Number one. Second is I think he's going to be good enough because of what he can do on defense that he can take the team as it exists right now and make it compete for the playoffs right away. I think he could take the existing offense. I have them keeping offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, who is interviewing for other OC jobs, as we speak. He's interviewing for the Bears job, I think, and I've seen his name floated for a couple others. I'm keeping him, and I'm saying you keep doing what you've been doing with the offense for the last 2 years. If Geno and Kenneth Walker stay healthy, this offensive line doesn't lose both its tackles in round one in week one. This is a top 10, 12 offense still. And I'll come in and I'll work on the defense. And then because he's 36, 37 right now, he's supposed to be this innovative guy. He's young. I think he's the guy that can be there for the next iteration of this team. When you move on from Geno Smith and when Bobby Wagner officially retires and when you overhaul this defensive unit again and Tyler Lockett is gone and you're deciding what to do with DK Metcalf, I think he's the guy that can bring in the next phase as well because he has that youth behind him too. So I like Mike McDonald to the Seahawks, fix that defense right away, keep Shane Waldron. I have Chris Hewitt coming from Baltimore to be the defensive coordinator. Hewitt has been with the Ravens since 2012. He's been coaching the defense. He's been the defensive back coach since 2014. And McDonald was actually the assistant defensive back coach under Hewitt for a year before he went and was with the Michigan Wolverines for a year. So those guys have overlapped for 5, 6 years with the Ravens. And Hewitt's not even the guy that I think would be next up to be the DC if McDonald were to leave. So that's the staff I have for Seattle and some of the reasons why. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually like it. We hadn't given Mike McDonald a place yet, and so I actually like it over there in Seattle. I don't yet know who I would want in Seattle. It's been so quick here. I haven't put together my list, but I like Mike McDonald there. I think it's a great fit for all the reasons you just mentioned. I think what he can do on the defensive side alone to bring that side up to par. Now, I think Geno Smith's days are numbered. I think at best he gets one more year as a bridge and then he's out. I think that's where this is going, no matter who's the head coach. I just think that's where this is heading. So I figure they draft somebody this year at quarterback to at least compete with Geno, if not kick Geno out. And I haven't looked at Geno's finances. I think basically they're kind of locked in for one more season ish
I think so.
on the cap side of things. But there's no reason why he couldn't be there next year anyway, just to compete for that job. But I listen to me. Geno was Pete Carroll's pet plant that needed some growing and some grooming, and I think Pete Carroll was so proud of that. And I think you're right what you said earlier. Pete really believed in Geno
Mm-hmm.
that hey, we can win with Geno, and I don't think that's true of everybody in the building. That's the case, and I think they're looking to go younger. But if you're Mike McDonald, you're a pretty hot name right now, and you're pretty young as NFL coaches go. You look like you have a long time to coach. Do you give any thought to what you mentioned that hey, new ownership is coming and they may want to clean house, so I might want to look elsewhere? How do you feel about that if you're Mike?
I think because Mike is coming. in and he could fix the defense right away and hang his hat on making that a good defense now, and they have the young pieces on defense to continue doing that for a while, I think you feel a little more secure than if you're an offensive guy and you're coming in, you're working with Geno Smith and Tyler Lockett, and then in 2 years, those guys are gone, and now you have to restart the offense again. I think if you're a defensive guy, you can fix the defense right away and hang your hat on that. So I have a little bit more confidence. But if it's just me personally, and yeah, I'm thinking about my long-term job security. Yeah, I don't love the idea if I don't know who the owner is going to be long term. But I think a defensive-minded guy would have a better shot long term than an offensive-minded guy of sticking around. And to your point about Geno, real quick, that's why like the Belichicks and the Vrabels were off the list for me because I think I agree. I think the reason Carroll is out is they want to go younger sooner rather than later, and those guys wouldn't be up for that either. So I think McDonald for those reasons makes sense.
It's a great point. It's stuff we talked about a year ago when we were talking about what we thought Seattle was going to do. And you know me, I encouraged them to move on and draft somebody, but I said I don't think they're going to because Pete doesn't want to. And listen, it's not that he's against rookies. He's a young guy himself in energy, and he likes young guys, but he knows his clock is limited. He's not going to want to start over if he doesn't have to, especially if he's got Geno in the building.
Yeah.
So we knew he wasn't going to do that last offseason, but I think you're right. I think that's part of what led to him being out this year. And it wouldn't have surprised me if Pete Carroll had been fired 2 years ago, but they had two
Hmm.
pretty good seasons here. And I was like, well, John's going to keep him. No, John Snyder's decided to let him go. So if John and Mike McDonald can actually put together a couple of playoff appearances, new ownership, I think, has no problem keeping them in. I think it's a great point right there. All right, I think we've covered all four of the NFC teams, right? Panthers,
I think
Seahawks,
so.
Falcons, and Commanders.
Yep,
All right,
that's it.
any final closing notes here? We're going to do a bit of a hodgepodge episode here in a little bit as well. But any more news and notes on these four teams?
Nope, I think that's it, Ben. Much more clear cut than the AFC.
Yes, yeah, quite a few things there to think about, and I'm sure. Listen, probably five or six of these teams are going to do it exactly what we kind of sort of think we want and will happen. Probably two of these teams are going to come up with something completely different and off
Yep.
the wall because they're just thinking something different inside the building. All right, everybody, thank you for listening. Simon, really appreciate it. Appreciate you being a part. Please go check out Simon Short's podcast, Apple and Spotify, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one. Bye. Give me just a second here to stop the recording.